During World War II, as the tide turned against the Japanese, air bases were built in remote parts of Australia, with several in WA. One of these was at Corunna Downs, which is about 35 kilometres south of Marble Bar. An early document requesting the acquisition of station land for an air base and dispersal of aircraft was signed on the 2nd of October 1942, with the acquisition to be complete by the 1st of November 1942. This was to be the home of Operational Base Unit number 73. The 380 Bomber Group of the United States Air Force used the airfield until they moved further north as the Japanese began their slow retreat. This was followed by No. 25 Squadron of the RAAF, which operated the base until the end of the war. In this video we will explore this old airfield and remember that time long ago when the whole world was waging war. This photo shows one of the B-24 bombers of the City of Perth No. 25 Squadron sporting the well-known Black Swan on the tail of the aircraft. This is a photo taken at Corunna Downs during the war.
Well, here we are at Corunna Downs again, and just walking through the bush I found a number of star pickets that enclose a small hollow in the ground where during World War II someone has set up their little tent or habitation and stayed here for whatever period of time. Sometimes I've always got my eyes glued to the ground looking around, because not just for snakes, but there's often little treasures to be found. In particular, bullet shells out here. It's interesting to see the number of bullets that are fired, bullets that were fired out here from World War II. God only knows how they controlled where they were shooting with so many people hiding out here. I think they were something like 30 yards wide at once. And the B-24s would taxi out the runway. The main one that goes behind them, sort of in front of those hills there, was the one that was used most often. The other one that runs up towards that way wasn't used as often, as far as I can tell, and it was also a lot smaller. And right now I've come across another concrete pad in the Spinifex. There's, I don't know, it's hard to work out what these things were, but the way it's sloped and there's a bit of shaping to the concrete, it's almost like this may have been some sort of shower or washing facility where the blokes would have a bath or a shower whenever they could. And, it's around areas like this you find, bits of metal stuck in the ground. There's one there, and one can only guess that they were, used to hold camouflage netting and whatever up in the air. Corunna Downs, we're at one of the sites where a bloke lived during World War II. You often see the star pickets around the place, and that's how they held their tents with a fly outright. This one's been developed a little bit more than usual. There's actually a concrete pad in the middle. You often find these things because if you look around, it's red dirt everywhere else, and where they've had a living, they've got crushed granite to keep the dust down. This one's a little bit special to us because 2 years ago while we were out here, I was hunting bullet shells, and I actually found a live bullet still on the ground from World War II. And after a bit more fossicking around, we came across this rubbish pit at the edge of the man's tent area, and we fossicked around and found little bits of his personal life, including part of his boots, part of a lamp, his lunch bowl, tobacco tins, and it looks like he had false teeth, because here's a cream tube for some sort of dental cream, and his plate. But more interestingly enough, we found the guy's dog tags buried in the pit here, and his name was Percy John Edward Parker, and he was in the 102 Anti-Aircraft Regiment, and eventually served his time out at World War II at Corunna Downs and was discharged in 1945 towards the end of that year, and he lived till about 1981 or 1982. So he did his time and made it back to peace. when you look around, there's actually a Lewis gun pit just over there, and behind us was a Bofors gun during the war, and one can only imagine that's some of the jobs he was involved in. And you're not going to believe it. I've just found another bloke's dog tag.
Another?
Yeah.
Oh.
Porter FK VX. No, it's Victoria.
Oh my God. So is it the same as the one that you just had?
No, that was Parker. It's Porter EK and his number is VX, and it's a very early number. It looks like an upside down 4-4. Sort of makes me wonder whether the dog tag's been tossed out, because the other one had a wrong number on it too. This area has intrigued me for a few years. I found it probably about 10 years ago when Daniel was a bit smaller and wandered through, and this particular area has got these barbed wire strands around these group of trees there, and there was another tree that it was attached to, but it's gone now. But the interesting thing is that it's actually grown through the tree, or the tree's grown around it. So if you imagine this is the size of the tree in 2010, and this is where it goes through, so it was half the size in 1945, say, it means in that time it's only grown to be, you know, like 20 centimetres in diameter. So this tree is basically double its width in 50 years. So it would mean that this little tiny tree is probably 100 years old. Last year or the year before, when I was fossing around with a metal detector, I got a fairly strong signal here, and I dug down and I found a number of metal objects like this. And I'll bring them closer just to give an indication of what they look like. And they appear to be some sort of carrier. You can see where there's a recess there for the, it's actually a round, it sits in there and it's held captive by this metal bit here. And on the front side it says 40mm Mark III, and this one's made in 1942. Previously, when I've done research, it indicates in this area somewhere around here was a Bofors gun, and when you do further research, the Bofors gun was 40mm, and they normally had about 4 rounds, and they were fed onto, you know, as a block of ammunition straight into the gun, and then they doof, 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 and they just kept feeding them like that. When I was coming over here to look for where I think the Bofors gun was, I'd come across this workings where people have been for whatever reason, and I'll just give you an indication of how deep it is. So we're down a few feet here, and when you look at the guys were digging through this fairly hard rock. There's been a fairly good reason for it, and we're probably looking at a pit that's 10 feet or maybe 10 feet square. A lot of hard work's gone onto it. You can only guess what it might have been. The map that we're looking at the moment shows that in this general area was a bomb site or bomb storage site, and also a petrol store. Now the bombs they were using were 500 pounds or even 1,000 pounds. They're quite large bombs. I mean, 1,000 pounds is 1,000 pounds, it's 500 odd kilos. And when you loaded up a plane, there was quite a few of those going on board. So the amount of ammunition they had out here would have been pretty huge. And these are part of the carriers that used to support the 1,000-pound bombs. So we know for sure that they actually had bombs stored out here, and there's 2 or 3 carriers just lying on the ground for those. Can't hold them too long, it's very hot. It's March now, and it's probably only about 37 degrees, I suppose. And I'm choosing to be out here. Can you imagine how the poor bastards felt during World War II when they didn't have any choice? According to our map that we got from the National Archives about the site, from 1942, it showed that there was a bomb storage site in this area. I've never been up here before, but looking at it through the bush, we found the 44-gallon drums which are behind me, and I've come out here now and found there's a few of these little squared or rectangular tins. I'm not sure what they had, kerosene or something like that, large lid on one side, but this one's still got green paint on the top of it, so pretty interesting. We've just come off one of the runways which is behind the car, and as I said before, you can see the white mounds where people have done, or the soldiers have done work, and what they've done here is built a Lewis gun pit, and the Lewis gun came out in two versions. One was anti-personnel and one was anti-aircraft. The anti-personnel had I think a 30-round magazine or something like that, and the anti-aircraft one was over 100 rounds in a round drum. It was operated by two men, or meant to be operated by two men, but sometimes they use three to actually keep feeding the magazines in. And I'll take you for a little walk straight up to it. And here we're looking down the Lewis gun pit. You can see there's like a water tank arrangement. That's what kept the dirt out, and the central pillar in the middle is where they stuck the pole that had the gun mounted onto it. Doesn't matter how many times we come out to Corunna Downs, there's always something new to find. Just ran over a piece of metal in the road, and when I had a closer look at it, it's threaded, and in front of it was another one, but I found another two over here, and what they appear to be is guy wire supports or anchors for a mast or something like that. And when we look down, there's a couple of insulators, and this one's FB. I remember I found one the other day, KP60. Well, this is 1943, and that's like an insulator for telephone, and this brown one is like an insulator that's used for separating wires on a feeder for a radio antenna. Now there's a creek down here, and I've just gone down there and I can actually see the antenna lying on the ground. The unfortunate thing is I think I just stepped on a snake, so I'm going to walk down there a bit more carefully and see what I can see. Yep, it's definitely an antenna, HF antenna, that's lying down in the ground here. Coming back out of the creek, there's quite a bit of wire down there, and this is the type of thing it's made out of. You can see that there was an eyepiece here, and it's been twitched together and quite well done by the look of it. And then to separate the active element from what's not used as part of the antenna are other insulators. There's a whole series of them just stuck in the ground down here. So I'd say there was a pole of some sort, and the antenna went that way towards the hills. And I know from previous experience there is actually a wireless transceiver site down the bottom there. We're going to have a quick look at that. And I've brought you to where the original wireless transmitter site was, just up on top of this concrete block. Right, now we're looking at one of the original drawings for the Corunna Downs site from World War II, and you can even see that it's still labelled secret. When we came in this morning, we came into Corunna Downs from a track out this way and hit there, drove down this taxiway onto this the smaller runway, and then we turned up here and we went out to where we found the dog tag this morning, and then we went out to one of these bomb sites either here or there, I'm not sure because we didn't actually check the timing. A few minutes ago we were at the Lewis gun pit, which was the end of this shorter runway, and we've come back through along here, and it was just up there I found the antenna in the creek, and we've now come to the wireless transmitter site, and that's in this area just here, and that's this concrete block. Right, this is the other side of that antenna I found before. You can see one of the little guy markers here, and there's another one just over there, and there's another one just in front of Julie. So that means the antenna would have been strung out sort of across the gully where we've just come from towards the other place back there. On the map it showed us where the powerhouse was, which is those big concrete blocks. Normally the concrete's where the generators are sitting, and the poor blokes ended up in some other crappy accommodation. But on the drawing it enables us to locate another wireless hut, which is where I'm standing right now, I'm assuming, because what I've got here is the concrete bases that a prefabbed hut would have sat on, and there's a lot of builder's material like nails and stuff lying around, and even a whole pile of plaster and a window frame just over there. And according to the drawing, there's supposed to be a much bigger building down here somewhere. I'm just going to have a quick scout and see if I can find the concrete base for that. You can see just down here in front of the powerhouse is a row of bottles that have been put in for decoration. Okay, what we found here is an armoured, it's either a telephone cable or power cable. I'm guessing it's a telephone cable. I followed it back with a metal detector underground to where we've just come from, where the wireless transmitter hut is, and it's heading off towards sort of just in front of the hill over there. And according to the drawing, there's supposed to be another wireless transmitter site up there, so it may well go to there. When I first started coming out to Corunna Downs, this road was not so washed away, and this cable was completely hidden. I've only found it in the last couple of trips that we've been out here, so there's always something new to find, even if it is old. This is where the open air cinema used to be during World War II. It was operated by a bloke called Ernest Newton Cook, and the sad part about Sergeant Cook was that on a trip into Marble Bar he fell from a truck and was killed, so he didn't survive the war. And as far as I know, he's the only person that was actually serving here that was killed during the wartime. There may have been people who left from here that died in other ways, but he was actually serving on the base when he was killed. He used to work for the cinemas in Perth for something like 17 years before he came out here. This is probably the biggest single concrete pad at Corunna Downs, other than the runways of course, that's left over, and this is where the hospital used to be, and it had a veranda all the way around. Each of the corners had a stand for water collected off the roof, and when you think about it, it's a really big corrugated iron building, and it would have stood out like dog's balls in the war, and the way they hid it from the enemy was to actually write Corunna Downs woolshed on the roof, so that if they came over they would have thought it was a woolshed. And if you follow me down through the breezeway, we go out onto the veranda at the back of the hospital, through another breezeway. This part out here was the dental surgery, so pretty good. And it was probably one of the few places where they had toilets that actually had chains and water to flush them. A couple of years ago I saw this place on Google Earth, and when I first spotted it, it actually had some weird comments that it was some sort of alien landing place or some weird stuff like that. Coming out here, the first clue we get is this small concrete block. When we look closer at the front of it, you can actually see that at the front of it is a small copper rod, and if we look carefully you can actually see that there seems to be row after row of Eric von Daniken like structures in the dirt. But we go out, we'll find out that there's nothing really strange about it at all. We see these small concrete blocks, and they're buried in the ground, and they go around in a circle. And all the lines that we follow, if we dig them up, we actually find that there's copper wire in there. The reason for that is it's making an earth mat for an antenna system that's over there. What sticks out mostly from the sky though is that there's a lot of this crushed white granite in the centre part of the circle. When you look at it, you can see that there's actually chicken wire buried in the ground, and that's to form a good electrical conductor to earth. And here we have the centre of the earth mat. There's a number of anchor points where there were high poles mounted on, and I think if we look at the map we'll find out that this is the a direction finding site, and I think this is probably one of the centre poles here. Well, that's our little trip to Corunna Downs. We spent a bit of time looking at some of the radio stuff, but being a radio tech, I guess that's fairly natural. Here we are looking down the main runway. It's been 55 years since the war finished. A few blokes that served here didn't make it home. A couple of guys and one plane crashed in Indonesia somewhere and were taken prisoner for a number of years before they were returned home. And that's the end of that. I'll catch you later.